Have you ever wondered how it would be to have simple guidelines that will allow you to create an empowered and happy organization? In today's episode, I speak with Jack Skeels, a former RAND senior analyst and current CEO of AgencyAgile, an agile transformation and coaching firm that helps agencies, consultancies, and other complex service organizations do better, faster, and happier. His career includes leading Sapient's 105-person Los Angeles office and executive roles in multiple startups. He is a coach to executives, a thought leader, and is driven to create a revolution in leadership and management practices, optimal organization design, and delivery excellence. Jack shares his personal journey, underscoring the pivotal moments that shaped his understanding of effective management practices, highlighting the importance of supporting weaker employees. Jack stresses the significance of promoting a positive work environment to drive organization growth and employee satisfaction. He discusses the substantial impact of employee happiness on overall organizational performance, shedding light on its often underestimated significance. Concluding the conversation, Jack shares insights into the skills and traits essential for effective management, touching upon the concept of situational leadership. Join us as we share the secrets to creating empowered and happy organizations with Jack Skeels, a thought leader and advocate for revolutionizing leadership and management practices. You are listening to the Business Excellence for Managers podcast, dedicated to all of you leaders and executives eager to continuously improve your business performance. I'm Juan, your host, and this podcast is proudly presented by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, my digital training company dedicated to your career and personal growth. Join me as I chat with inspiring individuals and professionals from around the globe, uncovering strategies that empower you as a manager to elevate business excellence within your organization. Having spent over 2 decades in various management roles within the international corporate world, I've transitioned into a management coach with a great passion for guiding managers and leaders towards greater results. My mission is simple: to equip you with the best techniques for refining your processes, ensuring customer satisfaction, and promoting employee motivation. The result? A measurable financial impact that far exceeds your investment. So join me on this exciting journey of continuous improvement for your organizational culture. I'm thrilled to have you on board. Hello, Jack, and welcome to the Business Excellence for Managers podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Juan. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to this. You've got such a great background. I think we're going to have some interesting conversations.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your time. And first question today, so that our listeners can get to know you. In a nutshell, could you please provide a brief overview of your journey leading to where you are today and how you discovered your passion?
Sure. Brief is going to be difficult because I'm actually fairly old. I came out of college as a software developer. They called them programmers back then. Quickly became a project manager, which I got promoted into that job, though I hated project managers because I thought they actually didn't add anything at all. I was a sort of smart aleck, know-it-all kid and the like. I ended up, though, sort of the curse of that was I ended up being a project manager and program manager for about 20 years, right?
Wow.
But I did it in a way that was like I kind of had a love-hate relationship with the job, but ended up building a project management and technology consultancy in the 1990s with 90 people, made the Inc. 500, all that kind of thing. And then I decided I wanted to understand this thing called business. So I sold my way out of that before you get rich doing those things. Went back to grad school to get my MBA in entrepreneurship to figure out what it was all about. And during the summer there, I got an internship at a think tank called RAND Corporation, which many people know from Pentagon Papers and defense industry research and the like. But it's actually about half of it is non-defense related and the like. But I worked in the organization for about 4 years, and I became their pet MBA, the guy who could explain the way business worked to researchers and the like. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't the real world. So I'm back into the real world for a while, and I had learned some agile techniques and stuff like that. And I didn't even think that much of them either at that time. But I wandered my way through a couple leadership roles into doing software development teams and stuff like that, but wandered my way into leadership role, marketing agency for video game companies. And when I arrived, I'm like, wow, this is filled with really cool people doing really interesting stuff. I felt like I'd escaped finally from the boredom of just software project management and database project management. And the researchers were kind of boring, though they're a lot more fun in that way. But all of a sudden, the business that's alive and exciting and all these moving pieces and the like, and I fell in love with the industry. That was 2005. And I ended up working a couple agency jobs, and one of them asked me to implement that thing called Agile, and it was a disaster. I mean, it actually didn't do anything. It didn't work inside of an agency. And immediately after that, we had the global economic downturn, and I got laid off. And I had this pivotal moment. I write about it in the book briefly, where my manager actually said, well, you were never that good of a manager anyways. Now, I had been head of the Los Angeles office for this major consulting and marketing company, and I'd ranked 7th in the nation in terms of that role throughout all their other offices and everything like that. I thought, how could that be? I'm doing what you guys are all doing. And I bounced out of there, and I decided, well, I've got a research background. I'm going to research what it is to do great management. And I came to this singular conclusion about 6 months later, is that most people don't understand managing. And the sad part of it was I understood that I didn't understand managing either. What I discovered is that they were right. They probably should have pointed the finger at themselves as well, but they were right. And the book I had intended to write, I couldn't write because I'd never done it before. I'm that kind of person. If I haven't done it, I'm not going to tell other people how to do it. That seems disingenuous. So I started a company. We chose a slick name, AgencyAgile, and we're actually going to change it shortly to something that's more consulting oriented, which is what we do. But it was a good name to get started with because people were crazy about agile things and the like, and worked with over 200 organizations now. And we've sort of worked out, how do you take cool, crazy, innovative, chaotic, creative, complex organizations and make them run really well? In other words, how do you manage well in the face of today's complexity and the like? And so out of that, after I got through 200 companies, I decided I could write a book finally, and that's where I am right now.
Wow, that's some story, and big congratulations to you for the birth of your book. That's
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's not an easy task. Yeah, and that's something that I have had in my to-do list since a couple of years now. And I always work on it a little bit, but it's just in such a slow pace that I think it's going to take me another 2 or 3 years till I'm done with it. So how long did it take you to write your book?
Well, I'll give you some bad news, right? So already from the story that I collected the initial research in 2009 and 2010. I didn't start really going back at this till about 3 years ago or so. And I will tell you, I would urge you to do a book, because I think one of the most important things I learned out of writing a book is you can have all the ideas you want, but if you can't write it out as a book, you don't really understand your ideas yet. It's a whole different thing. I was writing 1,000, 2,000 word pieces and getting published in trade publications and stuff like that. And they were great articles and people would love them. But I realized there was no connective tissue, and a book makes you do that connective tissue. It's a very interesting thing. I'm going to warn you also, just so you know, because I was surprised. I thought, God, if I can just write the book, I'll be fine. It turns out I got the book written. And then, of course, you go through the editing process, which is twice as hard as writing the book.
Oh, my God.
And after a while, you get sick of reading your own book. You're like, oh, it's sort of like if you repeat a phrase over and over and it sounds stupid after a while because it loses its meaning. I'm in the middle of my book doing one of the final re-edits. I'm thinking, every time I read a paragraph, I'm thinking, oh my God, Jack. Oh God, do you have to say it that way? That sounds so stupid. It's insane. And then you get the book really done and you think, hey, it's easy now. I know, because you have to go market a book and push it but it's great. It's been great.
Wow. Well, you've given me a lot of motivation to.
I didn't mean to demotivate you. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, but it does make sense. Now, the first part that it just puts all your ideas together, because I noticed that now in the first few chapters that I have written, that I'm thinking, wow, I never thought it in that detail and in that way, because it's just like it circles your head, certain concepts that that makes sense, that makes sense. But if you don't put it into paper, then it's still not, as you said, the connective tissue. Yeah, that where you says, okay, now I have really put it somehow it's defined. Yeah, it's really there. Yeah. Wow. So your book is called An Unmanaged: Master the Magic of Creating Empowered and Happy Organizations. Can you give us the summary of your book and what it's about?
Sure. And I think I'll tie it to the journey a little
Mhm.
bit as well. I had this idea that I just wanted to be doing good managing. And the initial frame that I took was this idea of, well, good managing means better productivity and the like. And we did accomplish that pretty early on by figuring out how managers should manage. I'll go into that in just a second. But one of the things that happened is we noticed when you did that one piece of getting people to be able to be more productive and managers were managing correctly, some other things happened that you didn't even try to do. And you would have a more cohesive organization and people were happier. And we saw this magical trifecta happen, which was, and that's what the tagline of our company is: better, faster, happier,
Mhm.
is people were doing better work. Work was getting done faster and they were happier doing it. And this sort of breaks that idea of an iron triangle, like, about scope, schedule, and money
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it was really like managers can actually make an organization more productive and the organization can be more happy while it's doing it.
Yeah.
And so that was the just crazy insight and the like. The real mechanism behind this is that managers typically overmanage
Mm.
and that managers are very expensive. One of the ideas I go into in the first section is this idea of the manager tax, that intrinsically the act of managing is a tax on productivity. And most managers don't realize this. And so that was the original title of the book, but I felt like
Okay.
it sounded too negative, right? And so we wanted a more upbeat thing, like if you master this. And so we did the title Unmanaged,
Yeah.
which sounds like it's a crisis. My team is
Mm.
unmanaged. And the typical response would be, well, go manage them. I'm like, no, no, they're unmanaged because they're doing a great job. And that's how they got there, is by me unmanaging or managing less. And
Yeah.
so that's the theme of the book, is to educate managers
Mm.
and illustrate to managers how to manage less and create more results, better results, and happier teams.
Fantastic. And that's, I think, the misconception that some managers think that in order for them to do a good job, they have to be micromanaging their team and they have to be behind their backs and breathing down their necks. And that's just not the way how it works today anymore. And also not the old school fear management where they think if I come here with a
Mm.
whip every day, that people are going to be running and doing more work, which is going to probably going to do just the opposite. So,
Well,
so
they'll
one,
run, but they'll run away. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, every company has a certain percentage of high performers and middle performers, low performers. So at the end, if you have that type of management style, then probably all the high performers will just get jobs somewhere else. And then you're just left with maybe just the middle and maybe the lower performers who maybe do not find so easily jobs somewhere else. And that's one of the things that is really important for managers to realize, that in order to also make the customers happy, then of course my employees have to be happy because that's going to be transferred to the customers of that company. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just going to jump in on a point you're making there.
mhm.
I go into this a little bit in the book, which you talked about the sort of strata of employees, like the high pose or high performers
Yeah.
and the middle level, and then your sort of laggards and the like. And it's very interesting. Once you start looking at things from this perspective of maybe managers are the problem, not the solution, or maybe the way we manage is the problem and we need a better managing solution, managers overemphasize high performers. Okay. One of the things I point out is the measure of the manager is the fact that you've got the laggards and the middles. Okay. Your job as the manager is to have all high performers.
Yeah.
Right. And so the high performers are easy. In a lot of ways, they don't need managing and they probably know more than you anyways. Right. And it's the real job of managing is to actually boost the productivity of the whole organization. Tell me about your weakest player, and I'm going to ask you, what are you doing to change that?
Mm.
Because that should be 80% of your effort, is to get the people that are weakest
Absolutely.
in your organization to become strong.
So true. And if I think back, the environment that you give them, it will change the way how they work. Yeah, it's just like if you think about a plant, if you put a plant in a small pot, it can only
Hmm.
grow a certain way and a certain height. It can grow in a small pot. But if you give them a bigger environment to grow, that then they'll blossom much bigger. And the same goes with an employee who could be very very productive, even a super high performer in company A, but that same employee is not going to be a high performer in company B because company B has a totally different environment for that employee. So for us as managers, as I also understand how you are explaining that, it's our job to really create that environment so that everybody can blossom.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I think there's another thing. I love your metaphor, by the way,
Oh,
of the
thanks.
size of the pot. It's great. I wish I'd thought of it. I would have put it in the book because I do use the idea of the humble gardener in the book, the
Oh,
idea that managers should be gardeners. The interesting thing is there can be a reinforcing loop on this, right? You can have this bias like Jeremy will never be a big plant. Okay. Jeremy's always going to be a small plant. So I'll keep Jeremy in a small pot, which means Jeremy is always a small plant. And it reinforces my belief that I actually am a good judge of human potential, right?
yeah.
And what we find out is when we put people in those bigger pots, if you will, that they tend to grow. And so, but it's very interesting. Managers have the illusion that they choose well, and all the research says, no, you don't choose well.
Yeah.
And when you pick favorites, you make the other ones worse.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty tragic, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I've seen a lot of talent development programs that sometimes they don't turn out to be as successful as they thought that they would be because of that differentiation. To say, these are our high performers. Yeah. And then what happens to the rest of the people? They think, okay, if those are the high performers, then who are we? Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it's very, very delicate thing. And one of the things which I'm very curious about is to see how do you measure the level of happiness of people in a company? Because I have tried to do that in the past, and I think we have succeeded in some way. But I'm very curious how you measure happiness in a company.
Yeah. So one of the things is the last people to ask are the managers. And the interesting thing is pretty much all the research shows that you can ask almost anything about the business of the workers, if you will. I make a distinction, workers or makers, the lower part of the pyramid. You can ask almost anything of them and they have a better assessment than the managers do. I mean, you can ask them about what the fiscal, fourth quarter results are going to be, and they're actually less optimistic than the managers usually overshoot those things. And so it's very interesting that the barometer of the organization is the workers, right?
Yeah.
And so you can ask a lot of information. I was inspired early on by a guy named Rensis Likert, and I mentioned him in the book as well. Likert, we all know from the Likert scale, which is, how much do you like Juan? It's a statement like, Jack really likes Juan as a podcast host and strongly disagree, neutral, it's got that scale. And he invented this very clever scale for doing a specific survey, which was asking workers about their managers' attitudes. And the questions would look like, when my manager is making a decision about the work process, he consults me to find out what I think a good modification would be. And all the questions are sort of that way. And so the strongly agree, the question actually is organizations where managers do consult workers around changes to the work process, those changes go better and those organizations run better. And so it turns out you can survey the actual workers about how managers interact with them, and the positive and negatives of those scores correlate to organizational performance and happiness.
Yeah.
So what this says, a couple of things are really, really interesting. And this is in 1955, and no one actually knows about this research. The interesting thing is that literally that managerial style has a massive influence on organizational performance. But if you listen to a manager talk about organizational performance, they put it all on the worker. I've got a few high performance people, but the rest of my people, wow. Yeah. But we know the opposite is true. And it's a very, very interesting, mind-bending thing. And I think most managers don't realize it. Part of it is you become a manager because you're usually best in your department these days, right?
Yeah.
So right. You get this idea that everyone else is the problem and you're not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely one of the things I've seen quite often in the corporate world, that the best employee of that area, of that team, of that department becomes the successor of the manager, and then he becomes then the manager. But he was maybe a subject matter expert on that topic, but he never learned about management skills or leadership skills and communication skills, and maybe to work on his emotional intelligence muscle. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, yeah. Wow.
There's actually quite profound research on it that shows that the teams that do that, you can promote either the deep specialist, they call it, or the competent generalist. And if you promote the competent generalist to management position, the team has higher performance and happiness.
Okay.
So, I tell people my cause, my purpose, my meaning in life is what I'm doing. And they think, well, you're a consultant to companies. I mean, yeah, good for you. But that's not really what it is that when we make a happier workplace, those people go home and they're happier. And we make happier home places in that way, right?
Yeah.
Work comes home every day when you bring it, when you leave the workplace, or even if you just leave your office and walk over to the rest of the house. So happier workplace makes for happier people and families and
Yeah.
happier lives. And that's huge. There's such a huge impact from that.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's totally a myth when one can say, oh, I'm just going to shut off from my work and then I'm going to be at home and I'm going to be now the husband role. Yeah, just change my hat. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that doesn't really work that way. We're not robots.
No, no.
Yeah. Wow. Therefore, one of my questions has been already answered, which is I wanted to ask you, what is the root cause that we sometimes have those managers who do not have yet those skills on how to manage a team? One of them we already touched, yeah, that perhaps that the expert of the team became then the manager. Have you seen any other root causes? Why do we have today some managers who are maybe not meant to be managers or leaders?
Well, the one of the problems is that we have this military structure that we use, right? This hierarchy. Okay. There aren't a lot of good reasons to do it except that it's what we've been doing. Getting promoted is usually a way to signal status change, right? But there's a big problem with that. Like, for example, in a department, what we're saying is that only one person gets that promotion. Right? So essentially there's a winner and everyone else is a loser in that way. And that's not really an optimal configuration for getting everyone to grow. And so our world needs a rethinking of the structure of organizations as well. We have some clients who've gone to, and I love to tell the story of this one agency in Australia, about 35 or 40 people, zero managers. Well, they have the CEO who owns the company, okay? Largely zero managers, and they have zero titles. And people were concerned when he first did this because they said, what happens when I leave the company? And he had a very simple answer. He said, when you leave the company, you can say you were whatever title you want. That's fine. You've got to live up to it in your next job. But I don't care what title you say you use, but you're just not going to use the title here. And so what it meant is that everyone just got to go do what they want to do. Now, people would get raises and stuff like that, but he really turned it into an organization where everyone could just do the work, right?
Wow.
And get paid well. And don't worry when you leave. If you leave, then you can call yourself chief architect or whatever you want. I thought that was a brilliant solution. He took out that whole thing of career advancement and said, just be great. Just be great and we'll appreciate you. And if you need the outside world to appreciate you, then do whatever you got to do.
And if you give employees that space, then maybe they'll come up with ideas and innovative things much, much easier than if they say, okay, I'm now only marketing. So let me just think in this marketing point of view. But if you say, hey, I could be anyone, like a shapeshifter, I could do anything in this company, then you suddenly come up with ideas and nobody would have even thought about.
Yeah. You bring up a point. It's called the T-shaped employee. Our organizations are designed to silo people. So essentially you have to go deep in your field to actually move upwards and gain status. The T-shaped employee is the employee that actually is broad, but has some depth, right? And like the letter T, the capital letter T. And the interesting thing is people are saying, well, we really want to have T-shaped employees. And I'm like, well, you have them already. Okay. we're all T-shaped. I mean, that's what we're like as human beings. We have things we go deep on, and then we're kind of curious about everything else. So it's not a thing that you need to hire for or anything like that. It's a thing you need to unleash.
Yeah. That's really good. I haven't seen it that way, but now that you have formulated that way, it really makes sense. Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to add regarding employee happiness to the topic happiness, because that's one of the things which I have maybe for myself. If I think about what was my motivation to do process improvement and process excellence, sometimes there are processes set up in a company in such a way that no matter how hard the employee is trying to do a good job, but somehow the outputs are not that good. And a lot of people usually point, and a lot of managers might point at their employees, say, hey, you are the one here making the mistakes. You're the last one in the supply chain. Yeah, so why did this mistake happen? And the employees say, yeah, but I'm doing my best every single day. And they're unhappy because they cannot produce good outputs process. And what really is happening is that whoever set up that process did a bad job at setting up the process. And now all these poor employees are suffering because of that bad setup. So that's why for me, it was so important to show people how can we improve processes so that all of you can always be doing a good job and you have a nice synchronized flow and everything is then the outputs are fine so that you can come to work much, much happier because you know there's not going to be so many mistakes like in the previous quarter. That was also to share what was my motivation in this whole world of managing people and looking at process improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you've come from a great history of the last 40, 50, 60 years of people who've realized that just because you can design an assembly line or a process doesn't mean that you should be the only person in charge of that. And
Yeah.
it started, of course, back with Toyota Production System was one of the big things, quality circles and the Ondan cord. And I go into a little bit of that in the book. I wish we saw more of that. I think that there's still this illusion that managers need to own process and control process. And the best processes are not like that. The best processes are team effort, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Let's now take a quick break to mention that the sponsor of this podcast is Wave Business Excellence Footprint, my digital training company deeply committed to your career and personal growth. On our website, www.wave-bef.com, you can find more than 20 courses tailor-made for managers and for employees aiming to become better each day. One of the most sold courses for managers is the Lean Six Sigma for Manager certification, a year-long program that boosts team motivation, improves customer satisfaction, tackles process issues, and improves company culture. For your employees' development needs, our top courses include the Lean Practitioner certification, addressing real process problems. Additionally, we offer the Green Belt and Black Belt certifications, equipping individuals with new skills for impactful projects that bring measurable results. And do not miss the Presentation and Communication Skills course, perfect for improving presentation abilities, whether it's online or in person. Head over to www.wave-bef.com for more information. I'm curious about chapter 17. There you write about the hidden cost of Project Contagion. Could you please tell us what this means?
Yeah. It's a really interesting topic. And what I'm writing about is essentially in the book is what we call project-driven organizations. These are organizations that are doing a lot of different projects, and every project is a unique project. I mean, like you're making something that hasn't been made before, figuring out something that hasn't been figured out before. We overuse the word project, by the way. Like I can say, I have a project, I'm going to clean my office. That's not really a project. That's just a task. It's cleaning my office, right? Yeah. But projects are when we're doing something that hasn't been done before and it's innovative. And most project organizations are multi-project organizations. And thanks to some bad other managerial theory decisions in the 1970s, most of them are multi-manager, multi-project organizations, and they get quite crazy. So I'm working on multiple projects, I have multiple managers reporting to me, et cetera. And because of the situation, when one project, well, there are all kinds of things that go wrong. I spend about half the book talking about everything that goes wrong in the situation. But one of the things that happens is people tend to think of risk as being isolated to a given project. In other words, if we go over a bit on that project, that's no big deal. Today's environments are so compressed in terms of time and resources and everything. And there's this illusion that despite all that and all that uncertainty, we can just stack people and projects in a very tight configuration and it's fine, but it's not. When one project goes bad, say we thought it was going to be 1,000 hours and now it's going to be 1,300 hours worth of work, where do we find those 300 hours? Because we need them now to finish the project. And by the way, we have other projects scheduled. And so there's this domino effect where I have to make some hard decisions. Either this project gets delayed, okay, which isn't what people usually do. It may not be the best decision anyways, or I keep the people on the project and try to get the project done. Meanwhile, the projects that they were going to work on are now delayed. So that means those projects are more likely to be late as well. And you get this domino effect. As one we say is bad projects make good projects go bad. and and
That's a
usually
good,
what happens is we
yeah.
choose the best projects to cannibalize, if you will. In
Yeah.
other words, you don't say, well, we'll pull resources from this other project that's struggling, which may have been a better decision, by the way, but we'll take them
Yeah.
from this other project that actually is really good, has plenty of time, has plenty of resources, and therefore we'll turn that one into a challenged project as well.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this cycle of contagion, and it
Mm.
doesn't typically have an end unless like the amount of projects goes down or something.
That's right. That's right. And at the end, the whole motivation of doing projects or doing anything it slows down a bit because people already they do not see the end of the tunnel, and even though it
Yeah.
sounds very cliche, that you probably use that quite often with your clients as well. And in my clients, I always say, yeah, don't forget to celebrate at the end of each project. And it's like, yeah, this is just like a little box that you just have there. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, we got to celebrate at the end. But then, you come to the end of the project and you just finalize it and they're already jumping to the next project. And you really do not even have the time to say, hey guys, we're making a clean cut. This is the end of the project. This is a summary. That's what we have achieved. Well done. Yeah. And it could be just a 20-minute meeting, yeah, that you just set up just to give that signal. But as it's not done that often, and everybody knows, yeah, I should do it, but not many people do it. It's really also taking away that momentum that one could have for the next project, because I think people are very happy when they can see a beginning and an end, and then they see, okay, that's again a beginning and an end. But if they never see the end and they just jump into new beginnings, they're like, oh my god, this is so frustrating.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on that. I think that there's an interesting piece there, which is what are we rewarding? Okay, in other words, if you think about it, if we finish the project and those who act eager to jump onto the next project without a break or demonstrate their commitment and the like, we reward them. I call them firefighters, right?
Yeah.
They're just like running from fire to fire, and we idolize them. They're the best and the like.
Yeah.
And so in a way, we even encourage people to not even think that they should get a break. But it wears them out, absolutely. And it wears out the other people. Even though the firefighters may get enough reward from that, and the like, everyone else gets burned out in the
Yeah.
process. And I think it's a huge problem. I think at the end of the day, the fact that we don't recognize that these project-driven organizations are fundamentally different from the what I call product style organization, the organization that's making the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
If I have an assembly line, I know generally how many products I can produce per day and that kind of thing. If I'm doing everything I'm doing is new every time I'm doing it, I have no idea what the schedule is going to be. And so the idea that we have deadlines as anything other is just a way to find out where we are with the project is crazy. You can't make deadlines for things you don't know what it takes to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. One other point that I found very interesting in your book is the concept of productive flow. So can you share more about what this means and how it contributes to a higher business excellence?
Yeah, so it's a lot of really interesting data. And this is sort of the center of our work at AgencyAgile. When we come in,
Mhm.
one of the first things we measure in an organization is what's called productive flow.
Mm.
And the productive flow is the amount of time that a worker has to actually focus on doing work. Now, the interesting thing, so in an 8-hour day, how many hours did you actually get to do work in, right? Now, the interesting thing in these multi-project, I see you're laughing, I can see on the screen here, in these multi-project, multi-manager environments, especially when it's high pressure projects and contagion and all that kind of thing, the ironic thing is there's so many meetings and so many interruptions. And what about my project? Or when is this going to be done? And productive flow shrinks to a very, very small number. Typically, the organizations we work with have productive flow around 2.5 hours per day per worker. Okay. And that's
I was
crazy.
I was laughing initially because I had that number more or less in my head. I said I could guess it's about around that exactly that range that you just mentioned.
Yeah. I think if you get below that, then the organization essentially sort of either goes into freak out mode
Yeah.
or something, because I don't know why it's a natural bottom, but
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be getting anything done, right?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is if you factor in the ratio of managers to workers, which tends to be quite high. In other words, you'll have say a 40-person organization and they'll have like 15 managers. Okay. So those managers aren't producing anything either, right? And then the 25 workers that are left over are operating at about, one third of capacity. So we have something like 8 or 9 effective workers out of a 40-person organization.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy.
Wow.
And largely, a lot of it's caused by what I said, interruptions, random interruptions. Managers interrupt all the time. And meetings. It's become a world of meetings, a horrible world of meetings.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the things that I really was reflecting when I was working in the corporate world. Every time I came home and my wife would ask me, "So how was your day? What did you do today?" And I sometimes felt a little bit
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, what did I really do today? I know I was in a couple of meetings. I was in the morning in 4 meetings. In the afternoon, I was like in about 3 or 4 of them. But was there anything like really decided? What did I contribute to anything today? And it was sometimes not very encouraging. When you go to work and you think, okay, I need to do something more productive than just sitting in meetings the whole time. And what do you think for the companies who are right now in that kind of meeting culture? What would you recommend them?
Well, I think it's tricky. First of all, we'll do a couple pieces of this. One is, why is the meeting happening? A lot of people think the problem is meetings. It's not. Meetings are a symptom, right? It's sort of like endpoint quality. And I know you work in the quality space, right? You say, why is it coming out wrong? You can't blame something that's happening at the end. It's something that happened farther up the causality chain, right? And the reason we call meetings, in fact, meetings are a good thing. Meetings are a natural human reaction to confusion, the need to get a group of people aligned and maybe make a decision, right? Or at least make sure we are aligned. So then you say, why aren't we aligned? And that's the most common explanation, is because we're trying to do things that we don't understand what we're doing. In other words, we started a project without thinking about it thoroughly enough, or we changed requirements and we're not communicating them well, or we're not communicating status of the work well. So someone calls a meeting, which kills productivity, to just find out how productive people are being. Like there's sort of an irony there. I'd like to tell the story about the single manager environment. In other words, I'm a manager. I have 8 people working on my assembly line. We make 200 widgets a week. I feel like I should be a manager. I decided to start holding meetings with the team every day. And our productivity drops because people can't make widgets when they're in the meetings. And then my boss calls me and says, hey, you made 200 widgets every week for the last year, and now you're making 180 widgets a week. What's going on? Is there a machine broken or something like that? I'm like, no. I decided to have some meetings to talk to the team. And he says, no meetings. I want 200 widgets a week. So it's really easy to point out that I, as the manager, was messing up productivity by having meetings, right? But now in a multi-manager, multi-project environment, there's no way to attribute those productivity losses to a managerial action, because it's costless. As a manager, can send out an Outlook, Google Calendar meeting invite and invite a bunch of people, destroy their productivity, and no one will remember that I did that. Right? And so in a way, it's so easy to destroy productivity and so difficult to identify who is destroying productivity. Close with one last little note. I've had a executive session. So I do a lot of these sort of meet with a leadership team and talk through these topics, just like we're doing right now, so they understand what's going on. I did one of these the other day at a Phoenix, Arizona client, and the director of technology said, I've got a solution. We're going to actually implement a tool that captures all the meetings that are scheduled along with all the people attending, and the meeting organizer will be captured. And we'll report on meeting organizers every month how many dollars worth of people's time you had in meetings. I thought it was genius. It's really, what I'm saying is, you'd see, I cost the organization $73,000 worth of productivity. And by the way, they only paid me $20,000 this month. So, right.
And that's really could be a project itself. We have to see, our project is called Let's Reduce the Number of Meetings that we're doing in our organization, and maybe increase the value added type of meetings that we have. So that's one of the things that we also try to do in the days when I was thinking, okay, how much value are we actually bringing through all of these meetings? So one of the things that we always were pending about is, first of all, do not invite the whole world. You don't always have to invite everybody to the meeting, because most people, when they sit there, they'll think, okay, great that I'm here, but what is my contribution to this meeting right here? And many times you could have just given mention that information to that person in 5 minutes, maybe per email. Look, this is the outcome of that meeting, but they don't have to sit there for 1 hour just listening to the whole conversation. So that's one thing. Yeah, who do you invite? Do you really need to invite everyone, or you can just keep it very, I would say, lean in a number of participants? And of course, the objective and what action points came out of that. Yeah, what decision points came out of it. And that was another tricky part, because every meeting that had an outcome or an action point, we had maybe like an action plan. And this action plan said, okay, this is the outcome. These are the things that we need to do. And this is what has been decided. But then, as there are so many meetings and you have so many little pieces of paper with different action plans, yeah, and then at the end, you get to the next meeting, maybe the following week, and you say, okay, so what about the actions that we spoke about from the previous one? He's like, oh yeah, we haven't done that one yet. Yeah. And then, then you have like this, like the backlog of action points that nobody can ever keep up anymore, because you have more meetings coming than you could actually work on your action points. So
did someone start an action point meeting? Because that would be just perfect then, right? So we're going to hold a meeting to talk about the action points from all the other meetings.
So funny. Yeah, that was something that we at the end had to create, like a centralized database where we had all the actions, and then you could really see them and prioritize them to say, okay, what actions came out. So anytime somebody had an action point from some meeting, they would enter it and it would then be registered in this central database. So you can actually follow up on that, because many times managers already lost overview who got what action, and at the end, out of coincidence, you then ask somebody, hey, did you actually do that, or is it already completed, yes or no? So it's just like all up there in the air. So that's definitely, I think, a lot of room for improvement for companies who are in that meeting modus.
We actually do a technique called evaporative meetings, which is when you start a meeting, figure out who needs to be there for the least amount of time and figure out how to get them out of the meeting as quickly as possible, right? Because most meetings are what we call compound meetings. They have multiple topics in them. Yeah. And usually it's just organized by something, but it's not organized by efficiency. So.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty good. I haven't heard about that concept yet. I definitely need to implement that, especially when my team gets bigger over here. and my next question is, from your perspective, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that leaders face today? Because the way how you see how organizations used to run 20 years ago, 40 years ago, is totally different to the way how they're running today. So what do you think are things that leaders need to prepare themselves? What type of training they need to do in order to be up to date with being a leader for today?
Yeah, I think it's confusing for leaders today. You've got this combination of charismatic leadership, right? In other words, I need to be inspiring to people. I need to and visionary leadership and all kinds of ideas around leadership. And yet none of those actually creates great managing. Okay. And I think the best thing leaders can do is demonstrate good managing techniques. And one of the most important managing techniques I go into is making sure everyone understands everything about what we're doing. And that probably includes even people who may not need to know everything, but bringing them along on that journey actually enrolls their brains. We were talking about earlier. We want to turn them into T-shaped thinkers and the like. And look, leaders do need to look outwards and what is our strategy? Where are we going? But leaders should spend more time looking inwards and encouraging the kind of very positive behaviors in managers in the management in their whole organization by actually being that kind of person as well.
Fantastic. If you envision the future, how do you think the organization of the future could look like? Do you see it with less silos? Do you see it with less hierarchy and more like a flat type of organization? How do you see the organization of the future?
Yeah, so I have in section 5 of the book, I talk about a thing I call the layer cake organization. If you want to visualize that layer cake organization, what we do is we take the pyramid and we turn it upside down. So we have the junior people on the top and the most senior people on the bottom. We get rid of all the titles and we make them into layers. And so the idea is someone may start as a junior level person, and when they get promoted to the layer below, which means their job is to support the juniors in the organization and help them get to the middle layer as well. And so the organization is not about power from the top, but empowerment from the bottom. I mean, there are a lot of cool things. One is that you say, like, the middle layer as a group is responsible for the junior layer as a group, not one-to-one assignments or anything like that. You may have temporary, like, Jonathan, you're going to work with Angela for the next couple of weeks to help her learn some skills. you'll do something like that, but it's everyone at that middle layer is responsible for everyone at the layer above.
Yeah.
In this way, we start breaking down the silos and actually making it more like a group team effort, a tribe, a family, that kind of thing. The
Yeah.
silos aren't needed in most knowledge worker organizations these
Mm.
days.
Yeah, that sounds really good, especially that I've seen so many companies where employees are just fighting with their elbows and they just, want to have all the information for themselves. They do not want to share it with anybody because
Right.
information
Yeah.
is power. And the other one turns around, gets stabbed in the back, and is like, what kind of a culture do we live in this organization? And unfortunately, there are so many of those out there. So just envisioning that, what you just mentioned, it's just going to break that type of environment. And it's definitely going to make it a much more pleasant environment to work in.
Yeah, I have a question for you since I know you've got
Mhm.
a lot of international and big corporate business experience. I had a very close friend of mine, very wise man, say one time, because I wanted to be a CEO. Like, I mean, it was like, I'm coming out of business school, I'm going to be a .com CEO, that kind of thing. And he said, be careful of what you ask for. A lot of CEOs aren't actually very good people. And he meant from a behavioral humanistic perspective. And I'm wondering what your observation, if you had to put a percentage on it, of how many CEOs are people you'd really want to be like versus people you wouldn't want to be like.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if I think back, probably when I started 20 years ago, there were more CEOs who I would not want to have lunch with than today. I think today we're getting better, especially
Oh,
that we
good.
are.
Cool.
Yeah, I do see that difference from before and today because I think they've understood that if you don't act responsible as a CEO, let's say if you have an organization that has, for example, the corporate social responsibility area,
Hmm.
or you're doing something that's going towards corporate social responsibility, and some they call it the sustainability, that I'm doing something that's also going to help the environment, then you might not even have the right people who want to work for you anymore because people today they identify themselves with the company they work for and they say, hey, it's not like
Yeah.
before where you get a job somewhere and you're like, oh, I'm so grateful that I have a job, I'm going to hang to it no matter what. And even if they
Hmm.
are destroying the planet by producing 1,000 items of plastic every single day and burning fossil fuels, and but I have my job, I can feed my family. So that was like more or less the
Right.
mindset of
Right.
before. And today people are like, hey, I don't align with their mission and vision and what they're doing to the environment. So I rather than just go and invest my time with a company who I feel aligned with. And therefore, the CEOs today, they have to somehow change their mindset and say, well, maybe we do have to do something better for not just to try to sell, have more profits every year and try to sell as much products as we can, but really to see what is our contribution to the world. Yeah, that what is it that we bring to everyone, and not only the employees, but to the consumers of our products. And I think the needle is moving very, very slowly, but it's moving the right direction. So,
Well,
so
that's good
that's
news.
yeah. So that's what I've noticed so far. Yeah,
Cool. Cool. Well, I hope
yeah,
that's true. I mean, I don't mean that what you're saying is not true, but
yeah.
that's sorely needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we have had so many examples from the past of CEOs and senior managers who have done wrong business decisions because they just had the profit in mind and not other aspects of what their business is bringing. I think from those examples today, the newer generation of CEOs who are coming up, they're really looking back at that and say, "Wow, I sure do not want to repeat what they did, and let me just do it better." Yeah, and
Oh,
I do feel that there is an improvement.
cool. Cool. Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, otherwise, I have another question regarding management. So the question revolves about who would you define as a good manager? What is their skills or what are their traits? So maybe just to make the question easier, if you're going to be hiring somebody in your company and you know that this person is going to get a manager role, what do you look out for? What are the things that you say when I'm hiring that person? I'm going to look for these requirements to see if I can figure it out if that's the right person.
Yeah, it's a lot of soft stuff, and
Yeah.
there's a great book that was written by Henry Mintzberg. Mintzberg is one of the godfathers of organizational and management research and the like. He wrote it in the 1990s. I do cite it in my book. It's called Managers, Not MBAs.
Mm.
Okay. And he points out that an MBA program doesn't make you a manager, it makes you an administrator. That's what the A is, right? The skills for a manager, and he said, if you really want to make managers, what should that curriculum look like? And it looks like a course in self-awareness, in communication skills. I mean, it was a beautiful little list of stuff, and it felt very zen. It felt very centered, like understanding your role in the situation. And I went through a leadership coaching training program, a lot more like that. Like, how do we have that empathetic, high EQ conversation?
Yeah.
How do we make room for the other person in the room? All those sorts of things. So I'd look for that. I'd look for the patient teacher, the humble gardener,
Yeah.
the fan of humanity, that kind of thing. I don't want someone who drives, beware of the person who says they drive project success. That's the person who carries the whip, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that way of selecting managers, the way how you just described it today, I think that's the way how some people are doing it in certain companies that I'm right now supporting. And that's something what I really did not see in the past. So if I look 20 years back, I'm like, okay, nobody ever asked that kind of question. And
Yeah,
usually it's
yeah,
more like, is he a tough guy, or is this a tough lady who can really, earn
yeah,
the respect from their team members because they can really hit the table and say, that's the direction we're going to go and everybody's going to do it. Or if not, then my way or highway. So it's like,
yeah.
that's like, okay, that's the manager of the past, and the manager of the future is more, as you mentioned, the humble person who has good listening, active listening skills, and has that emotional intelligence to sense how is my team doing. They should have that sixth sense to know my team is doing good today. I think I should just leave them alone, let them do the work. They're all very happy and jolly today. At the moment somebody's not doing well, you should be able to sense that as the manager, and then you can approach them and say, hey, I think there's something going on. Let me know what's going on or what's happening. So I think that is definitely the manager of the future, and perhaps hopefully even the manager of today.
Yeah, and I love what you say. I'll add one last little piece in, which is managing by method is very important. And I go into this in a lot of ways is the one needs to use your senses, but also not rely on your senses overly so, because we have so much bias, right?
Mm,
And our actions cause other actions and the like. And one of the things I go into in the book is choosing who gets to do what is actually fraught with all kinds of peril, and better to use mechanical process or method. In other
mm,
words, it's Jonathan's turn, it's Angela's turn, and just follow that, right? And that opens up, to go back to your earlier metaphor, that makes for a bigger pot for every
yeah.
plant, right? That Angela knows she will get a chance, and now she's getting ready for that chance, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I think back during the time when I was managing so many teams, I barely did any team meetings because I just allowed my team members to do the team meetings. I say, okay, today's Jessica's turn. Can you then do the summary? How are KPIs doing? Are we on time? Are we on target? Just give us a quick summary on how things are doing. And then for the next team meeting, maybe it's Tom who's doing the presentation. So
Excellent.
it's really that rotation that everybody knows, okay, at some point of time, I'll be also doing the team meeting. And this also makes them so secure that in case I'm on holidays or on a business trip, then they can still keep the performance, because even though the manager's not there, they know how things is run. They know where to find the KPIs. They know how to communicate with each other when something is not doing well, and not like the classical type of managers that when they're on vacation, then everybody's just like, visually putting like their feet on the table and say, okay, let's just wait till our manager's back, then we can again start working hard. And as soon as the manager is back, then everybody's just throwing all their problems and all the backlogs and say, look, everything what happened since you were gone. So that type of world is like where we would like to get away from, and more towards the world where the team is still rowing the boat all the same direction,
Yep,
and
exactly.
even though
Yeah,
the manager is not there. Yeah.
yeah, totally agree.
I have two final questions for our conversation for today,
We've gone
because
pretty far. Yeah, sure. Okay,
yes,
go ahead. Sorry about that.
we have such interesting topics that we've covered today that I usually hold these conversations between 30 and 60 minutes. But this one today is just really, really interesting. So thanks a lot for that, Jack, for all the
Sure, sure.
inputs. Yeah, my listeners, they also tend to be very actionable kind of people. So they probably would want to have some learning nuggets, or maybe some action points that they could do at the end of this podcast. So is there anything that you could recommend if this is a manager listening to this podcast? What would you recommend them to do to be able to
Okay.
have like this action point?
Well, I'll give you two answers. One answer is that's what my book has in it as well. So is the idea was you can not only learn the why behind these things, but you can also learn some of the what, some techniques you can use and the like. Again, that's not even an easy thing. You need to actually really work at it. Probably the thing I'd recommend, which is also reading a book, but you can take action, is the act of asking questions rather than making statements is incredibly powerful. And there's only one form of it you need to avoid. And that is the leading question where, like, who screwed this up, right? That's implying that someone screwed it up. Instead, you might ask, how did we get in this situation?
Yeah.
Or what can we learn from this situation? So the use of questions rather than statements is very, very powerful. And what it does is invites everyone else to learn. And that's one of your jobs, is to invite everyone else to learn.
Yeah.
And using questions in a way that people know that they're expected to answer and take turns answering and all that kind of thing, it can be very, very powerful. The more you can ask questions rather than drive and hit it, everyone rushes to an answer before they know enough.
Yeah.
And the book I'd reference is a book called Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein. It's a great book on the art of asking questions when statements wouldn't work. So,
okay. Thank you for that. I think that's something that hopefully the listeners can digest and to think, how is it that they do exactly that point that you described, and hopefully will implement that in the next occasion. And one final point, I'm just very curious to hear your opinion on situational leadership, because there's some employees I notice they are motivated when they feel that their manager is closer to them, in the sense of that they are regularly checking on them, saying, how are you doing with your tasks? Is everything running fine? So they're like, almost every day there, the manager asking them, and they feel, okay, my manager's there going to ask me, so I need to really progress with the topics that I have. While you have other employees who say, well, I don't need my manager asking me every single day, what are my tasks for today? I want to be left alone. I get my goals every 3 to 4 or 5 months, and I just want to be left alone. I'm empowered to achieve those goals. I'm the expert, and I know how to get there. So I'm just going to report to my manager perhaps every month on the progress. So therefore, you have those two types of personalities, one who really needs the manager to be motivated, while the other one really needs the free space. So do you think that that's also another management skill that is important to have, so that one knows how strong to do that situational leadership skill?
well, so I struggle with some of those ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One is the idea that people should be allowed to work in isolation. I don't agree with that. I don't think that makes for good teams. I don't think it is a good model, right? So I'm a huge advocate of whole teams or whole departments or whole organizations getting together on a very regular basis. You can think of this as sort of a stand-up meeting, but having a lot of conversation about what's going on, what each individual is doing. You can think of this as a status report if you want, but it's also a connection method. And teams that feel connected actually work better together.
Yeah.
If you have someone who doesn't like being connected to a team, in a sense, it can be a negative force on the team as well. And I will go to one of my favorite CEOs I worked with, a guy named Michael Lebowitz. And Michael said, no one is so good as to be an asshole. He's basically, I want good people in my organization, and I will, if it means maybe I don't get some top 2%er, so be it. I'd rather have everyone else be powerful.
Fantastic. And I think every company has their company values. And even though there might be a person who will overperform in certain goals, but if they do not comply to the company values, then I hope that whoever has the decision over that person will say, I'd rather see somebody who follows the company values and maybe have less profits at the end of the year, but we are compliant with our same mindset and mission that we have together as a team.
Yeah. Very important.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for that wonderful conversation. And
yeah, very fun. Great
it
questions.
was really great. And what services do you offer, and where can my listeners find you?
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. So as you might gather, AgencyAgile, which we're renaming to Better Company, depending on when this podcast comes out or when your listeners are listening, but you'll find us either place, if you will. What we do is we actually do sort of small and medium-sized business consulting, especially agencies and project-driven organizations. As our old name implies, we're very much about teams running well and that kind of thing. And so we do a whole range of services, including how to make projects go ridiculously well. So we're very skilled at that, and it's a very needed thing out in the world there. You can reach me personally on LinkedIn, Jack Skeels, and please do connect with me or follow me. That'd be great. If you've got questions, shoot them to me. The book is available on Amazon, Unmanaged, And you can, like I said, you can reach us at agencyagile.com or bettercompany.co right now. So we couldn't afford the M in the name, but reach out to us. Would love to. And we have all kinds of training and educational videos available free on the website. And you can learn more about our thinking and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, fabulous. I'll be putting all of that on the show notes. So anybody who cannot take notes at the moment, they know they can just click there and have direct access to all of the links that you just mentioned right now, all to your website. And well, Jack, thank you so much. And hope to see you someday again for another show, perhaps.
Yeah, likewise. So next time I get out to Spain, I'll definitely give you a call. Juan, what a stellar interview.
Yeah.
Thank you much for the great questions and great discussion. Very, very enjoyable.
Thank you, Jack. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed this interesting conversation with Jack. Before we wrap up, let's reflect on the key takeaways. Learning nugget number 1. Meetings can often hinder productivity, and it is important for managers to be aware of the impact of their actions on efficiency. Key takeaway number 2. The layer cake organization, where the hierarchy is inverted and managers support the junior employees, can help break down silos and create a more collaborative environment. Learning nugget number 3. Leaders should focus on good managing techniques and prioritize communication and understanding within the organizations. Takeaway number 4. Chief executive officers need to be mindful of their behavior and the impact it has on their organization and employees. Number 5. Good managers possess traits such as self-awareness, communication skills, empathy, and the ability to ask questions rather than make statements. And on the final takeaway for today that I've noted down is that situational leadership requires managers to adapt their leadership style based on the needs and preferences of their team members. For your convenience, we have collected all the links and references mentioned by Jack in the show notes. Please take a moment to rate, subscribe, share your comments, and pass along this episode to individuals who could gain from it. Your support is very much appreciated, and I'm grateful for your messages as I'm also a work in progress and persistently striving to improve each day. Thank you, stay tuned, and see you in the next episode of Business Excellence for Managers.